Welcome back to Grimm Advice with Gretta Myers. You've entered the Grimm War. Let's turn the page together. Alright, even though I did a Saturday special, I forgot to slate this week's videos for you because I'm really on top of things. So, here we go. Here's what's happening this week. Today, the Robber Bridegroom. Tomorrow, or whenever, Mr. Corbs. Then the Godfather. And then Frau Trude. And then Godfather Death. Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, that's what's happening this week. Don't ask me what the Saturday special is this week. I don't know. It might be a blooper video. It might not be. Without further ado, the Robber Bridegroom. And this one I have read a version of, and it's a little spooky if it's as bad as the version I read, so spook warning, here we go. Okay, without further ado, this time, the Robber Bridegroom. There was once on a time a miller who had a beautiful daughter, and as she grew, he wished that she was provided for and well married. He thought, if any good suitor comes and asks for her, I will give her to him. Not long afterwards, a suitor came, who appeared to be very rich, and as the miller had no fault to find with him, he promised his daughter to him. The maiden, however, did not like him quite so much as a girl should like the man to whom she is engaged, and had no confidence in him. However, she saw or thought of him, whenever she saw or thought of him, she felt a secret horror. Once he said to her, "You are my betrothed, and yet you have never once paid me a visit." The maiden replied, "I know not where your house is." Then said the bridegroom, "My house is out there in the dark forest." She tried to excuse herself and said she could not find the way there. The bridegroom said, "Next Sunday you must come out there to me. I have already invited the guests, and I will strew ashes so you may find your way through the forest." When Sunday came, the maiden had to set out on her way. She became very uneasy. She herself knew not why exactly, and to mark her way, she filled both her pockets full of peas and lentils. Ashes were strewn at the entrance of the forest, and these she followed, but at every step she threw a couple of peas on the ground. She walked almost the whole day until she reached the middle of the forest, where it was the darkest, and there stood a solitary house, which she did not like, for it looked so dark and dismal. She went inside it, but no one was within, and the most absolute stillness reigned. Suddenly a voice cried, turn back, young maiden dear, 'tis a murderer's house you enter here." The maiden looked up and saw that the voice came from a bird, which was hanging in a cage on the wall. Again it cried, turn back, young maiden dear, 'tis a murderer's house you enter here." Then the young maiden went on farther from one room to another, and walked through the whole house, but it was entirely empty, and not one human being was to be found. At last she came to the cellar, and there sat an extremely aged woman, whose head shook constantly. "Can you not tell me," said the maiden, "if my betrothed lives here?" "Alas, poor child," replied the old woman, "do you know where you have come? You are in a murderer's den. You think you are a bride soon to be married, but you will wed death at your wedding. Look, I have been forced to put a great kettle on there with water in it, and when they have you in their power, they will cut you to pieces without mercy, will cook you and eat you, for they are eaters of human flesh. If I do not have compassion on you and save you, you are lost." Thereupon the old woman led her behind a great barrel where she could not be seen. "Be as still as a mouse," said she. "Do not make a sound or move, or all will be over for you. At night, when the robbers are asleep, we will escape. I have long waited for an opportunity." Hardly was this done, then the crew came home. They dragged with them another young girl. They were drunk and paid no heed to her screams and lamentations. They gave her wine to drink, 3 glasses full, 1 glass of white wine, 1 glass of red, and a glass of yellow, and with this her heart burst in two. Thereupon they laid her on a table, cut her beautiful body in pieces, and strewed salt on it. The poor bride behind the cask trembled and shook, for she saw right well what fate the robbers had destined for her. One of them noticed a gold ring on the little finger of the murdered girl, and as it would not come off at once, he took an axe and cut the finger off. But it sprang up in the air, way over the cask, and fell straight into the bride's lap. The robber took a candle and wanted to look for it, but could not find it. Then another of them said, "Have you looked behind the great barrel?" But the old woman cried, "Come and get something to eat, and leave off looking till the morning. The finger won't run away from you." Then the robbers said, "The old woman is right," and gave up their search and sat down to eat. And the old woman poured a sleeping potion in their wine, so that they soon lay down in the cellar and slept and snored. When the bride heard that, she came out from behind the barrel and had to step over the sleepers, for they lay in rows on the ground, and great was her terror, lest she should awaken one of them. But God helped her, and she got safely over. The old woman went up with her, opened the doors, and they hurried out of the murderer's den with all the speed in their power. The wind had blown away the strewn ashes, but the peas and lentils had sprouted and grown up, and showed them the way in the moonlight. They walked the whole night until in the morning they arrived at the mill, and then the maiden told her father exactly everything as it had happened. When the day came when the wedding was to be celebrated, the bridegroom appeared, and the miller had invited all of his relations and friends. They sat at table. Each was bidden to relate a story. The bride sat still and said nothing. Then said the bridegroom to the bride, "Come, my darling, do you know nothing? Relate something to us like the rest." She replied, "Then I will relate a dream. I was walking alone through a wood, and at last I came to a house, in which no living soul was. But on the wall there was a bird in a cage which cried, 'Turn back, young maiden dear. 'Tis a murderer's house you enter here.' And this it cried once more, 'My darling, it was only a dream.' Then I went through all the rooms, and they were all empty, and there was something so horrible about them. At last I went down into the cellar, and there sat a very, very old woman whose head shook. I asked her, 'Does my bridegroom live in this house?' She answered, 'Alas, poor child, you have got into a murderer's den. Your bridegroom does live here, but he will hew you in pieces and kill you, and then he will cook you and eat you.' My darling, it was only a dream. But the old woman hid me behind a great barrel, and scarcely was I hidden when the robbers came home, dragging a maiden with them, to whom they gave 3 kinds of wine to drink, white, red, and yellow, with which her heart broke in two. My darling, it was only a dream. And one of the robbers saw that there was still a ring on her little finger, and as it was hard to draw off, he took an axe and cut it off. But the finger sprang up in the air, and sprang behind the great barrel, and fell into my lap. But there's the finger with the ring,' and with these words she drew it forth and showed it to those present. The robber, who had during this story become as pale as ashes, leapt up and wanted to escape, but the guests held him fast and delivered him over to justice. Then he and his whole troop were executed for their infamous deeds." Alright, spook warning. I'm going to officially put it in the title. Not safe for children or anyone with any sort of anxiety or trauma or... Okay, I'll leave it up to you, but I'm going to heavily warn you and say this one was hard for even me to read. Like, I already knew what was coming, and so maybe that just makes it harder because I already have time to dwell and think about how horribly sad this story is. Okay, we're gonna get into some deep, meaningful analysis today. Okay, first off, I like the very, very beginning. The dad was like, not going straight off because this guy's rich, or because he's good looking, or because he's like actively looking. Is like, is there something wrong with him? Is there some reason that I shouldn't let my daughter marry him? Like, he cares about his daughter. He really does. Like, he does everything in his power to be like, no, okay, he seems legit. But then the girl still had this uneasy feeling. And first off, he's like, why don't you ever visit me? And she's like, well, I literally don't know where you live. And he's like, I live in the dark forest. You better come. No! Big no! Red flags! Don't do it! If someone you're spending time with is giving you an uneasy feeling, and then they ask for a further sign of commitment, and it just makes you feel even worse, don't do the commitment thing! Don't talked about a couple of videos ago where, like, laughing is sometimes not, actually it might have been last video, where laughing is not necessarily sometimes something that, like, is a good thing. Like, I'm not laughing because it's funny or it's a joke. I'm laughing because I'm deadly serious, and I don't know how best to say it. If you are uncomfortable and then something happens, you go. Get out. Trust that feeling. And the version I read was honestly even worse. Because in the version I read, like, he was the guy of the town. Like, everybody loved him. He was amazing. Everyone loved this guy. They trusted him. He was great with kids. He helped everybody. Like, everybody was like, this guy is great. And still, the girl was like, I don't know. Like, this makes me uncomfortable. But it's hard in a situation where everyone around you is like, this is a great person. Why are you uncomfortable? Let me stop. That does not make your feelings invalid. If everybody in the world, which that's scientifically impossible, due to the fact of old people, young people, people who get, who just haven't met this person, if everybody in your world loves this person, which again is impossible, that doesn't make your feelings invalid. If you are talking to this person, or you just are around this person and you feel uncomfortable and everyone else around you is laughing, which again, laughing doesn't mean that they're comfortable or having a good time. Maybe they're just as uncomfortable as you and they want to show it. Get out. Leave. Stop associating with that person. If you're uncomfortable, validate that feeling, because we've seen in this story how quickly it can go south. Granted, every person in the world that makes you uncomfortable is not going to be an inherently bad person, but maybe they just say something that you really don't agree with or like, or they just have this one, like, bad habit that you're like, everything else is fine. There's just this one thing that doesn't make your feeling invalid. In fact, why would we stick around if there weren't some good qualities about that person? If we feel uncomfortable, if you just straight up feel uncomfortable with a person and there are no good qualities about them, you don't stick around unless you have to. Like, it's a cousin that you really don't like and you're at a family reunion, in which case just avoid them if you can. Or if it's like a coworker and you love your job, but you're like, nah, this coworker, avoid the coworker if at all possible. Like, if there's no good qualities about that person that you can see, like, that are worth sticking around, you don't find reasons to stay. So why, if this quality is so importantly bad to you, like, if you're like, this is bad, I don't like this, why would you stick around for the good qualities if this is making you so uncomfortable? I mean, I've been in similar situations, so I'm asking myself as much as I am you, honestly. Okay, and then let's turn it on its head for a second. Maybe you're uncomfortable, but you're ignoring it. Or maybe you're not uncomfortable at all. You're like, this person's great. I don't understand why anyone would not want to be around them. But then there are things like the bird. It's like, this is a murderer's house. Go away. You don't want to be here. Or the old woman. Or the fact of how he and his buddies treat another person, girl or no. Really. Honestly, watch how they treat other people, and if You don't like what you see? That's... Again, why invalidate that feeling? Like, there will be signs and people who will tell you this isn't really a good person for you to hang out with. Whether that's parents, friends, family, random strangers, or just watching how they treat other people. If you're not liking what you're seeing or hearing, maybe it's time to look into it. Now, of course, there will be situations where things are actually okay, and like you're with a good person and you're friends and things are actually okay, but there's going to be someone who's negative against it. Again, you really have to trust. You have to take in both other people's judgments without treating them too much, and your own judgments without treating them too heavily, and look at the facts and look at the situation as non-judgmentally as possible while taking in all sides. It is one of the hardest things you have to do, especially if you're in a situation where you're hoping to marry someone like this girl was. Like, you gotta be... It's one of the hardest things you have to do, because you gotta both judge and not judge, and it's crazy. So, there's that. The last thing I want to point out is this whole section at the end where he's like, tell a story. And so she does. She does in this open environment. She expresses herself as much as she is able while reassuring him, don't worry, it's only a dream. So first off, dreams can have meaning. Don't read too deeply into them because your subconscious is a wacky place. So, but they do often have some meaning. Secondly, a lot of times people will share their story however they're comfortable. If they're not comfortable, they'll share it subtly. Stories they write. Essays they write. They write. Art they draw. Characters they role play. Like, if someone is uncomfortable and if someone's struggling, watch how they express themselves creatively. Because 9 out of 10 times, you'll be able to find at least some sort of sign or form of what they're struggling with. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? It can be either. It can be nothing thing. People just tend to, when they're struggling with something, they get it out. In any way they're capable of, they get it out. So, watch that. But again, there will also be people who will try and be sneaky and be subtle and tell stories like this. There's like, it's only a joke. It's only a joke. I was only kidding. It's just a story. It was just a dream I had. If you're struggling with something and someone makes a joke about it, and then you express concern and dislike for that, and they come back with, I was just kidding, it was just a joke, can't you take a joke? You don't need to take that. That is honestly one of the most invalidating things a person can do. I mean, certainly like, if you deal with things with humor, and you and a person are joking back and forth, and it's fine, it's great, like, you're both enjoying it, that's one thing. If someone's like if you're depressed and someone's like, oh, yeah, and then they make some sort of joke, I don't even want to try and bring up an example because of how wrong that is. Especially to me, like, that's something that personally really bugs me. But I've talked to other people, and that's really something that's not okay, especially in the mental health department, trauma department. Yeah. Or, like, in a relationship where you're like, hey, can you not do that? And they're like, oh, I'm breaking up with you. It was just a joke. Like, you don't have to take that. If you're feeling invalid because someone is A, making jokes about your situation and you don't appreciate it, and then B, you try and stand up for yourself, and they say it's just a joke, can't you take a joke? Don't you have a sense of humor? A, it's not a joke. B, treat it seriously. Like, if someone says, oh, I'm going to hurt myself, for example, you treat that absolutely seriously, and you tell them, don't at all. Treat it like it's funny, or they'll keep going. But most importantly, if they're coming to you and saying, oh, you can't take a joke, this is your fault, it's on you for being uncomfortable, no, that's not okay, and you don't have to take that. I mean, if that doesn't bother you and that's not your number one problem, that's totally fine, that's valid, you do you. But if that's something you're struggling with and someone keeps doing that to you and it's hurting you, gives you the uneasy feeling, you don't have to take that. That's valid. Like, you're valid. Don't let someone's joke tell you otherwise. You're a valid human being with thoughts and feelings that matter. And with that, we've reached this episode's happily ever after, or not so happily ever after. We hit some heavy subjects, so I understand. I'm a little shaken, you're a little shaken, and I feel it was important to say what I did, so, and read the story that I did. So whatever you decide, that's up to you, and that's valid. I'm not going to hold it against you, so. Either way, we've reached the end for this episode. So, tune in later, and we can turn a new page and learn more together. And because my camera woman went upstairs because I warned her it was going to be scary, I'm going to be turning it off again. So, see you guys later.